Good evening, everyone. If we could have your attention, we'd like to get started. On behalf of the Chester County Economic Development Council and the Southern Chester County Chamber of Commerce, our thanks to Herr's for hosting tonight's presentation. Our special thank you to Ed Herr, Crystal Maceros, and the Herr's staff for all of their help and support with the details and logistics that go into something like this. Why don't we give them a round of applause? Thank you. At this time, I would like to recognize the dignitaries who are with us tonight. If you could hold your applause to the end, that would be great, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. State Senator Dominic Pileggi. I know he'll be here. So wherever we are in the presentation, we can stop and clap. So, State Senator Andy Dinniman. He also said he would be here. State Representative John Lawrence. I know he's here. Chairman of the Chester County Commissioners, Terrence Farrell. Vice Chairman of the Chester County Commissioners, Kathy Cazzone. We would also like to thank the municipal elected officials who are with us tonight. We thank you for taking time to be here tonight. Thank you. You want to clap for them? We are delighted to have everyone with us tonight to share in the launch of Vista 2025, which is Chester County's 10-year economic development plan, and importantly, to hear tonight how the plan connects Southern Chester County to the overall strategy for the economic health and balance of progress and preservation. My name is Cheryl Kuhn, and I am the proud president of the Southern Chester County Chamber of Commerce. I know I speak for the Chamber's officers and board of directors, many of whom are here tonight, when I say how pleased we are to work with Gary Smith, Mike Rigolonis, Bob Grabus, and Dave Cicchetti on the implementation of this plan in our region. And now I'd like to hand the microphone over to co-chair of the Route 1 Economic Development Initiative Steering Committee, Terrence Farrell. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cheryl, and welcome everybody. It's good to be in Southern Chester County. As many of you know, these are where my roots are located, right up the street in Lincoln University, where I grew up. But I want to talk a little bit about Vista 2025 and how it came to be. And then I want to welcome to the podium my co-chair in the Route 1 Initiative, Jim Horn. The county of Chester, as you know, is a great county to live in. We're one of the best counties in the nation. You may have heard these facts and accolades before, but we're one of only 42 triple AAA counties in the nation out of 3,000 some counties. We're the best educated county in the Commonwealth. We're the healthiest county in the Commonwealth, and we're the wealthiest, although that wealth isn't spread equally. And we have a very diverse and dynamic economy in Chester County. When we encountered the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, because of our diversified county, yes, unemployment grew, some businesses failed, but we fared much better than the rest of the nation and the rest of the Commonwealth. And we are where we are in part because, among many other factors, we plan. We have a landscapes plan. Landscapes 1 was our first 10-year land use plan, and just recently we approved and put into place Landscapes 2, which plots the use of the county's both boroughs and municipalities and its open space for the next 10 years. And as part of that plan, we called for an economic development strategy. Because unless we don't plan, the world's economy will catch up to us and surpass us. So we engaged in a public-private partnership with the Economic Development Council to come up with strategies that would keep us at the forefront of the economy in the county, in the nation, and in the world. This Vista 2025 is supposed to be a plan that renews itself. This is not a document. I'll show you the full extent of the document. It's a binder, about an inch thick of papers. But this plan is not meant to be something that's put on the shelf and not taken down and forgotten about. It's a plan that we will continually renew and review each year, update it, change strategies, change goals. When the Economic Development Council and the county began work on the plan, because we needed to really have an outside perspective, we called in a consulting firm, TIP Strategies, out of Austin, who did this sort of things, worked with municipalities. In fact, they've done more than 250 of these economic development strategies throughout the country. And one of the interesting things that came out of working with TIP Strategies was that of all the economic development plans they had done, more than 250, Chester County was the only place that the significant driver of the economy was our place. The specialness of the place that Chester County is. That's not just the open space here, but it's our location on the eastern seaboard, close to Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York, close to the populations that are consumers here on the East Coast. But there was a specialty of Chester County Place, and when Dave Cicchetti goes through the PowerPoint, you'll see by the word cloud some of the responses to the open-ended questions that people answered about what was special about Chester County. The agricultural, the open space, the beauty. These are sort of factors that no one else can manufacture, and these are keys to our economic success. So in this public-private partnership, we got together a number of the businesses, because really government can set the policy, but it really will be the private businesses that drive the entrepreneurship, that hire the workforce, that really will be the cutting edge for keeping us where we need to be. So there was a committee that got together, and there are a number of sponsors, business sponsors that help with this initiative. Too numerous to name, but I would like to thank all the people that did financially support Vista 2025. And we worked with the Economic Development Council, interviewed people. We had more than 100 people who participated in the process. Some people participated in online surveys. We, at the county, ultimately got to the point of passing a resolution in support of Vista 2025. And once again, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who are key in this. Kathy Cazzone, who's here, our vice chair, and Ryan Costello, who's gone on to bigger and better, at least different things in Washington, D.C. And our new commissioner, Michelle Kickline, who couldn't be here because of another engagement. But we are all united in support of this plan. So one of the things I want you to take away is that the commissioners are involved with and see the importance of Southern Chester County. We not only support Vista 2025, which has key elements that support the economy in Southern Chester County, but we are deeply committed to the Route 1 initiative. Many of you know this is an initiative that we began 3 or so years ago, involving the Southern Chester County Chamber, involving the Oxford Chamber, involving businesses and municipalities all the way from Kennett Square down to the Nottingham border. So this is part of our commitment to Southern Chester County. We want to see all of Chester County thrive, but we're not forgetting Southern Chester County. So with that, I'd like to bring to the podium the CEO and president of Tri-M and the co-chair of the Route 1 initiative to talk a little bit about that Route 1 initiative, and then you'll hear a little bit more about the Vista 2025. Once again, thank you all for your attendance and thank you for your support.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good evening. The steering committee, the Route 1 Initiative Steering Committee, was established with the support of the political leaders in Chester County as a collaborative effort between Chester County Economic Development Council and the Southern Chester County Chamber of Commerce to help encourage the growth of new business along the Route 1 corridor. The people and communities of Southern Chester County envision a region that works together to provide jobs for its citizens and expand its tax base. A region that invests in its business districts to create attractive destinations for commerce and development. A region that protects its agricultural base and conserves its picturesque landscapes. A region that builds on its sense of place and diversity that makes this region uniquely suited as a great place to live, work, and play. The steering committee over the past 12 months was primarily made up of the chairs and co-chairs of the working committees. We have 7 committees, which approximately 40 volunteers, which are as follows. The Branding and Marketing Committee, co-chaired by Eric Stretch and Cheryl Kuhn. The Land Development and Municipal Coordination Subcommittee, which is chaired by Dennis Melton. I saw Dennis here tonight. Infrastructure Subcommittee, chaired by Bill Hostetter, and he's here tonight. The Transportation Subcommittee, co-chaired by Linda Ingerthron and Tim Phelps. Worker Housing Committee, chaired by Daria Payne. The Economic Development Subcommittee, chaired by Bob Norris. The Land Development and Open Space Subcommittee, chaired by Peter Kellerup. These committees have made some great progress over the past 12 months, and I want to thank them for all their hard work and continued support of the Route 1 initiative. The initial purpose of the steering committee was to keep everyone informed throughout those 7 committees as to the progress of these subcommittees, and to provide oversight and direction for the Route 1 corridor. During 2015, we'll be expanding the steering committee to include some key business leaders from the Southern Chester County region. The work of the Route 1 initiative dovetails nicely with the Vista 2025 that you heard earlier and we'll hear more of in a little bit. With that, I'll turn it over to Bob Gravis, and Bob Gravis will introduce our speaker so we can hear more about Vista 2025. Thank you.
Jim. I want to thank everybody for coming here. I think I know at least about 2/3 of the group that are here tonight, and thank you for coming. It's my pleasure to introduce our main speaker, David Cicchetti, and I've had the pleasure of working with David for the past couple of years. To give you a little background on David, he received his undergraduate degree from the University of Delaware, nearby. Got his master's in urban planning and regional planning from Virginia Tech. I don't know why you had to leave the state to get that, David, but you know, they have him here. Anyway, he is his professional career as a land use and economic development planner, and he has worked with the Delaware County Planning Department, worked with Marcus Hook Borough, and then spent 15 years as the executive director of the Community Development Corporation and the Redevelopment Agency in Chester. So David's got, some experience under fire, having worked in Chester. And he's bringing all that experience, and he does some wonderful things in Chester, the casino down there, the waterfront redevelopment, and also the soccer stadium, which is great venues for Chester. In 2012, David joined the CCEDC, and he formed his own consulting company, Competitive Communities, because all these communities, all these municipalities, all our cities, all our counties, they all compete against each other for those companies that are looking to relocate. So David formed a company to help municipalities actually look at that competitiveness and set themselves up to do well with that. And he has been, he's brought that company to the CCEDC and has been consulting for us for the last 2 years and has been shepherding the Vista 2025 program. So with that, I'd like to bring David Cicchetti to the podium. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. First of all, I'm happy to be here and delighted to see that so many people are here to learn a little bit more about Vista 2025. As Commissioner Farrell has indicated, we started this process a little over a year ago, and I think it's created a sense of direction, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And again, I'm happy to be here to talk about that with you tonight. Overall, what we're going to do, first of all, Vista 2025 is a countywide economic development strategy, so you're going to hear a lot about it from a countywide perspective. At the tail end, we'll talk a little bit about how some of those issues that we've covered at a countywide level could play out and could impact the Route 1 corridor. First of all, this slide is actually one of the most important slides in the entire presentation, and it's the intro slide. And I say that for a couple of reasons. If you look first at the logo, hopefully everybody can see that. We spend a lot of time on logos. Logos create images and create pictures in people's minds. So if you look at that logo to the left, you have a circuit board that reaches and talks about the high-tech community that's a part of the essence of Chester County. There's a windmill that talks about agriculture and also, in one sense, about alternative forms of energy. There's the beaker that you would see in a chemical or a pharmaceutical, and that relates to the strength of the pharmaceutical industry, which has driven a lot of the growth in Chester County. And then you have the covered bridge, which talks about the preservation and the tremendous history. And part of what this is all about, in fact, the essence of Vista 2025 is those two words you see underneath Vista 2025, progress and preservation. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight, that Chester County, and Commissioner touched on that, Chester County is somewhat unique. There are not many counties that have managed to balance that kind of progress and preservation, that can have agriculture and open space at the same time they have significant biopharma IT. That is not your typical mix that you would see in places. There usually is, they tend to go one way or the other, but in Chester County we've managed a tremendous balance between those two. And we'll talk again more about that. I would also call your attention to the bottom right-hand corner. For those of you who have not had a chance to look at Vista 2025, it can be viewed at www.vista2025.com. The entire strategy is available there, as is are the results of a community survey questionnaire that was conducted as part of Vista 2025. So how do we start this process? You know, why are we doing Vista 2020? Why do we think this was something? Well, number one, as the commissioners indicated, Landscapes 2, Chester County's award-winning comprehensive plan. By the way, as Bob said, my background is planning. I think Landscapes 2 is one of the best plans I've ever seen. I think they really did a tremendous job here in Chester County. I think they got it right, and I think we're happy to be a part of that. And in fact, what we really are in this case is implementation. What Vista 2025 is looking to implement one of the priority actions in Landscapes 2, which was to create a countywide economic development strategy. That was the essence of what we were looking to do, to take that next step and to follow on and do something that was recommended in Landscapes 2. So what is a strategy? But before what is a strategy, a little bit about why a strategy. Why is a strategy important? I like and I've used this I guess, image a couple of times in presentations about Vista. For those of you who are familiar with Alice in Wonderland, there's a line that's often misquoted, and I'm going to misquote it again, that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And if you're not thinking about where you want to be, again, Commissioner Farrell talked about how Chester County has been really good at planning. You need to start thinking about where you want to be so you can make informed decisions about how to get there. And there's one other item I want to bring up in that same context about why. Chester County, again, Commissioner Farrell, he made it easy for me to do this because he covered a lot of points I wanted to cover. But Chester County is at the top of the heap right now. One of the best counties in the country on all kinds of measures. But the reality is that just because you're on the top now does not mean you'll stay there. If you think about those of you who have looked at investment prospectuses, at the bottom line, in very small print, it says past performance is no guarantee of future success. So just because we've been the top of the heap for the last 10, 15 years does not mean we'll be at the top of the heap in 10 or 15 years from now. And that's why a strategy is important. And so what is a strategy? Strategy is about shaping the future. It's about the human attempt to get to your desirable ends with available means. And most importantly, it's about choices. It's about choices. No one has unlimited resources. No one has the option to do everything they want to do. You're going to have to make choices. So how can we figure out what are the right choices for Chester County so as to create that sustainable advantage, so as to keep us at the top of the heap, so that when we look at those statistics 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we still have that AAA rating, and we're still one of the healthiest, wealthiest, and wisest counties in the country. What should we be doing? What choices should we be making? Because communities are in competition. Communities are in competition. You don't think about it. There's a lot of business people in here. Business people understand competition. Somebody's making a product, they want to sell it to you, they want to do better service so they can take your customers and they can make the money from that product. But communities are in competition as well. And here's how I can tell you the two best examples I can give you of how communities are in competition, and these two communities kind of lost. When I was growing up, I was born in 1952. As I grew up, I spent a lot of time in the city of Chester. I would take the bus from Marcus Hook to the city of Chester, and I could go downtown to the city of Chester at 11 or 12 years old and wander the city. At that point in time, it was just after the World War II economy. The city of Chester was booming still. It was the center of commerce in Delaware County. I'll take that same situation and apply it to Chester County. Those of you who are familiar with Coatesville, in the 1950s to the early 60s, similar situation. But guess what? The world kept changing. The world kept changing. And those manufacturing businesses, in Coatesville's case, the steel industry, in Chester's case, the shipbuilding and other industries, they kept changing. And those communities were not able to compete and make the adjustments that let them become and stay at the top of the heap. And so in that context, I think what's important about Vista 2025 is what should we be doing now so that we don't find ourselves somewhere where we don't want to be a few years down the road from an economic point of view. Okay, I guess I didn't want that slide. So why Vista? Why Vista 2025? I'm sure everybody's been thinking, why did they pick that word? Why Vista 2025? Well, the dictionary definition, at least the Merriam-Webster online version of Vista, the word vista, is a large and beautiful view of an area of land or water. I think everybody would agree that that could easily apply anywhere in Chester County. But it's also a large number of things that may be possible in the future. So Vista is about looking forward in time and trying to see where we are now and where we want to be. But Vista is actually more than that. The word Vista, we use it as an acronym for the process that we're working our way through. To start with the vision, to have ideas about how you might make that vision a reality, to find solutions to the problems that are standing in your way, to put teams together to address both the challenges and the opportunities, and then to take actions. To not be passive, to not let the world pass us by and put us in the back seat. So what's the definition? As the commissioner has already indicated, Vista 2025 is a public-private partnership, essential public-private partnership between the Chester County Economic Development Council and Chester County, designed to create and implement an economic development strategy to enhance the county's economic health. Two words that became very important as we went through this process. Sometimes you'll hear economic development, sometimes you'll hear economic growth, but in this case, in Chester County, because of the unique makeup of the county, the correct phrase is economic health. And that will strike that balance between progress and preservation and end up with a healthy community, not one that is struggling with finding the right balance. Guiding principles. As we began to put the strategy together, we wanted to make sure that certain things were essential as we put together the overall strategy and the individual strategies. And it starts with being sustainable, and that's that balance between progress and preservation. We're not looking to pave over the entire county, but we're also probably not looking to have the entire space be forest and farmland. There's some balance between those two extremes that we want to strike that can keep Chester County the kind of place that it is. That I can have a nice house in a suburb if that's what I want, or I can live in Westchester or Phoenixville or Canada if I want, and I can drive out to Longwood Gardens or take a walk through the beautiful parks that we have here. And so you have that balance and that sustainable kind of community. It's also intended to be inclusive. And by inclusive, we mean that every resident of Chester County is valuable. Everyone has something they can contribute. We want to hear their voices. We want to know what they're thinking. We want them to be involved, whether it's in getting a job, in helping with their PTO, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Get everybody involved, and you generally end up with a better result. And finally, in terms of guiding principles, and this relates specifically to the economy, we want to be diversified. If you think back to my examples of Coatesville and the city of Chester, they were not well diversified. They were heavy into manufacturing. And when the manufacturing world changed, and it went south, and then it went overseas, those communities struggled. So we don't want to be in that situation. We want to have a balanced economy. We want biopharma and IT and agriculture and retail, and we want a lot of that spread all over so that if one particular section of the economy is overtaken by a technological change or an economic change, the whole community doesn't suffer. Because we're diversified, we can be more resilient and more adaptable as the world economy changes. All of that, all of those principles contribute to economic health. Again, that's our byword from the point of view of Vista 2025. Commissioner talked a little bit about what we went through. I'm going to touch on that a little bit again. He mentioned TIP strategies. I'll give you some background on that. The Chester County Economic Development Council initially thought we might do this process in-house. There's a lot of very talented people at the council. But the more we thought about it, the more we realized, hey, we understand Chester County pretty well, but we're not sure we're completely up to date on what's happening in other parts of our country and maybe even other parts of the world. So we wanted to bring somebody in who could add that perspective to what we already knew about Chester County. So what we did was put together, identify a list of 10 of the top economic development strategy producers in the country. We invited them to submit proposals. We got 6 proposals. We narrowed that down to 3. We brought those 3 in and we interviewed them, and we ended up selecting TIP strategies. TIP strategies, by the way, is out of Austin, Texas. Those of you who are paying attention to those kind of things, Austin, Texas is one of the hottest communities in the country. From an economic point of view, from a music entertainment point of view, South by Southwest is one of the biggest events in the country, and it's all about music and tech. So we thought there's something there. Plus, those gentlemen at TIP Strategies have done a lot of work in the upper Northwest, in the Seattle-Portland area, a lot of very innovative thinking and approach coming from those areas. So we wanted somebody to bring those perspectives. We picked TIP Strategies. We then put together an executive alliance to help guide us through this process. I'll come back to that in a second. We went through a lot of data collection and data assembly. We really wanted to know what's happening from a data perspective. I mean, you need data. You have to understand what the information is telling you as one piece of the puzzle. We also had roundtable discussions. We convened 10 different groups, from manufacturing to healthcare to young professionals to agriculture, to let the people who are out there every day living and breathing this stuff tell us what's happening in these aspects of the economy. We also did a community questionnaire. Our consultant told us, hey, we generally don't get a lot of responses to these. They were shocked when we had gotten 300 responses. And we'll talk a lot about that in a minute, about how that really put the entire strategy in a slightly different context based on the results that we got. All of that led to the strategy preparation. TIP Strategies and the council worked very hard to put the document together. That document and the process. I mean, the Executive Alliance, we met with them to look at the data, we met with them to look at the analysis of the data, and we met with them to look at the draft strategy. So all of the people in the Executive Alliance had 3 opportunities to look at what we were doing as we went from step by step in the process. All of that led, as the commissioner indicated, to a resolution on the part of the county commissioners in support of Vista 2025 in November. Commissioner also mentioned the people who helped support this, who made it possible from a financial point of view. You can see we did have a cross-section there: universities, companies, the IU, the council, the county. A lot of people were willing to invest in the thinking that needed to go into the future of the Chester County economy. I talked about the Executive Alliance, which was really the kind of the guiding oversight that we had as we went through this process. We wanted them to take the information we were assembling and developing and bounce it off them to make sure we weren't getting too far off track in any one direction. It's an amazing group, and they were incredibly helpful to us. From Westchester University and the IU and the educational community to the business community, to the developers, Eli Kahn and Liberty Property Trust and the Hankin Group, to government, to the Chester County Association of Township Officials, but also folks like Comunidad Hispania here in southern Chester County, where they're headquartered. It's the Natural Land Trust. Molly Morrison was an incredibly valuable part of that. She gave us all kinds of insights. We have the United Way of Chester County, Surrey Services for Seniors. We have all kinds of people who came and brought their perspective to us so that we made sure, again, that we weren't going too far in any one direction and we didn't really forget people and aspects of Chester County. Again, it was just an amazing group. They really helped us a tremendous amount. And I think if I added up correctly, there are 5 representatives here country fresh mushroom, longwood gardens, modern mushrooms, Comunidad Hispania, and I'm sure I'm missing one. I think there were 5 who had. Thank you. How could I forget where I am right now? Yeah, so all of those were keeping the southern Chester County perspective as we went through the process. I talked about the data that was assembled. If you go and look at the strategy itself, there were a lot of tables like this. Too many to go through here in one event like this. But I thought I'd pick one, and this is the one actually that was probably the biggest surprise to us and to our consultants. We knew that agriculture was important to Chester County, but we had no idea that 47% of the employment in the agriculture sector of the economy for the 11-county metro region is here in Chester County. That's an amazing statistic. Amazing statistic. It tells you how important Chester County is, agriculture is to Chester County, but also how important it is to the region. That 47% of the employment of people working in the agricultural business are here in Chester County. Again, I refer you back to the strategy. There's lots of information in there. Some of it very interesting. You might be wanting to take a look at it. I mentioned that one of the things we did was do a community questionnaire. The community questionnaire was an online version of a questionnaire. It had a number of multiple choice questions. That community questionnaire is also available at the website. You can take a look at it to see the results. The multiple choice questions are easy. You add up the number of responses and you get a percentage that said this or that. But we had a number of open-ended questions. We wanted to give people an opportunity not to check a box, but to tell us what they thought. And we did not restrict them. You could write one word, a sentence, a paragraph, a book. It really didn't matter to us. Tell us what you think. And when we got all those responses and started to look at them, we said, but how are we going to analyze this? You can't just, again, count up the percentages. So our consultant said, there's this tool called a word cloud. How many people have seen a word cloud before? Maybe not quite half. I had not seen it before this. I was very impressed. It's an amazing tool. What a word cloud does is take all the things that were written. So in this one question, what were the qualities most valued about Chester County? It takes all of the words written, and every time a phrase or a word is stated, it gets a check mark. And the software counts those check marks up, and the more check marks you get, the bigger the print. So when we asked the people of Chester County what was the most valued, what they most valued about Chester County, take a look. Open space, beauty, scenery, historic assets and culture, schools, parks, farms, rural character, etc. As I said at the beginning, the community questionnaire really had an impact on the context of the strategy. As we got these results, not that we didn't kind of know that, but the amazing volume of people who said that's what they cared about really influenced the final results of the strategy. So, and again, there were actually, I think, 5 or 6 of these word clouds in there. So again, I encourage you to look at the strategy and the community questionnaire. One of the other questions are, what are the greatest opportunities here in Chester County? And interestingly enough, not quite that same emphasis on 1 or 2 things. A little more diversity here. Agriculture, corporations, capitalizing on assets, Coatesville, manufacturing, business attraction, high-tech farming. You can read that as well as I can. So it tells you that when you think about where the opportunities are going forward, there's a lot of balance. There's a lot of balance. How are we going to figure out how to implement activities and strategies that maintain that balance? So again, the community questionnaire and the word clouds, I thought, really helped us structure the approach. That led us to goals. And there are 5 goals in the strategy. I'm going to touch on each one of them. I would encourage you again to look at the strategy. But the number one goal, again, as the commissioner said, was to maintain and enhance quality of place as a key component of economic health. I can tell you that if you looked at 1,000 economic development strategies across the country, you'd be hard-pressed to find more than a handful that would mention quality of place as a key component of their economic development strategy. Usually it's about attraction. Usually it's about some of the other things we're going to talk about in a minute. But very, very few. In fact, our consultant indicated that I don't think they had ever done one that had quality of place as one of the major goals of that strategy. And that's what really reflects the uniqueness of Chester County, that balance of progress and preservation that the county has managed to foster and support with public programs, with private participation. So quality of place, and quality of place, as the commissioner said, is not just open space preservation. It's also the character of the downtowns. It's the kind of history we have. It's the living environments that we have, the fact that lots of people can live in different kinds of environments. It's a place that people want to be. Quality of place is all about where do people and where do companies want to be. And Chester County, obviously, that's a very important aspect of the success historically and will be an important piece of the success going forward. Goal number 2 is to position Chester County as a magnet for talent. I'll come back to that in a second. And as a model for building an employer-ready workforce. One of the reasons Chester County has been successful economically is that early on it became a place for high-tech companies. It goes back to Bill Rouse and Great Valley when he announced that that Route 29 corridor was the high-tech corridor for the Philadelphia region. And he was able to make that stick. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And companies came here and became the growth companies that a lot of that you see today, some of which have been passed on. They grew to a certain point and they were acquired and name changes. But that corridor and those high-tech companies became the strength. Along with agriculture, they became the strength of Chester County's economy. So we can have a high-tech economy. Biopharma, IT, business services, think of Vanguard. Internet and TV video, think of QVC. I mean, we've got those kinds of companies here, and they're our strength. Those companies need the best talent. For them to be successful in their competition with other companies, they need the best talent. And there's a dynamic underway right now. Some of you who have millennials for children probably are experiencing it yourself. It used to be when I was young, you would send an application in for a job. If you were lucky enough to get selected and you had to move, you relocated to where the company was. The millennials, this next generation, they decide where they want to live, and then they go look for a job. And so companies are learning, well, if I want good employees and the best employees are deciding to live somewhere, then I better have a company there, because maybe I can't get them to come to the places where they don't want to live. And so you'll see some of the Chester County companies actually opening up divisions in Philadelphia because there's an attraction to Philadelphia. So how do we compete? How do we attract that next generation of workers so our high-tech companies continue to be successful? So we need to figure that out, and there are strategies that talk about that. How do we be that talent magnet? And those jobs are kind of at the top end of the economic spectrum, but not everybody's going to be a research engineer, a rocket scientist, or a biopharmacist, whatever. How are we going to make sure that the rest of Chester County, the average folks, have the skills that they need to compete as well? Anyone who's looked at the kinds of problems that we've had over the recession, if you look carefully, you'll see that those with lesser education and lesser skills are the ones that struggle the most. And as a result, we need to be cognizant of that as well. We want our entire, remember that when we were talking about those guiding principles, the idea that everybody is an asset and we want to make sure they're all part of it. We need to be thinking about all of our potential residents as employees and make sure they have the right skill set to be competitive in the ever-changing environment. And so there are programs operated by the county, there are programs operated by the Chester County Economic Development Council designed to help all of the residents in Chester County be the most successful employees that they can be. And some of the strategies address those kinds of things, what we should be doing, what we're already doing. And again, the idea is to be as successful as possible. The more successful we are on these two fronts, the more successful our businesses will be. And guess what? We're talking about your children and your children's children and the kind of jobs they'll be able to get living here in Chester County. So we want to create a position where those companies want to be here so that our children collectively can stay here and work in Chester County. Goal 3 is to expand business attraction and retention efforts with a focus on targeted industry clusters. Targeted industry clusters are segments of the economy. Could be agriculture, could be biopharma, could be business services, and we obviously have strengths in those 3 areas. It's really challenging to try and be all things to all people. So if you're going to work to build your economy and you want it to be diverse, remember, we're not trying to put all our eggs in one basket. You need to figure out which sectors you're competitive in. Where do you already have a workforce? Where do you have the kind of environment that companies want to go to? And if you're going to try and build the economy, you want to focus in on a limited number of industry sectors, but enough to keep a broad base. And so goal 3 is all about figuring out how we can do that. And there's, again, a number of strategies that address that goal. Goal 4 is to establish an innovation culture that supports entrepreneurship and business growth. Innovation culture. A lot of people recognize that one of the top ways for an economy to grow is to start a small company and let it get bigger. There's probably a number of businesses in this room that either the owner, current owner, or the father or the grandfather had a small business and it grew into a bigger business. So that whole process is critical to any economy. But everybody kind of recognizes that, and so people are playing, inventing ways they're trying to help make that happen. But it's not easy, and it's not something you can just sort of do half-heartedly. And that's why it's an innovation culture, not just throw a few dollars at young companies and hope they locate. It's about finding locations where they can go. Chester County already has 3 different small business incubators. It's about finding mentors. So every business has struggles as it goes through its growth period. How can they get the help that they need so they don't fail at some point in that spectrum from small to successful? And how do we help them find the money that they're going to need to grow their company? And all of that is part of an infrastructure, an innovation infrastructure, innovation culture that we want to build. We have good elements of it here now. We want to build on it and expand it so that companies, young companies, entrepreneurs, individuals with an idea who want to turn it into a company can come to Chester County and be successful. That's what Goal 4 is all about. And Goal 5 is support critical infrastructure and targeted corridors of opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit more about corridors of opportunity in a minute, and we'll see some maps that talk about what the likely corridors of opportunities are in Chester County. But again, thinking about Chester County, what's unique about Chester County, it's that balance between progress and preservation. We're not looking for urban sprawl. We're looking for smart growth. We're not looking for everybody to just go out and build wherever and take up farmland, and all of a sudden you don't have the kind of community that you already have. I think what we're talking about is trying to identify places where growth makes sense because of physical components, and then try and encourage growth to happen there. And let me say one thing else about Vista 2025, which I haven't said so far. This is not a mandate from on high. This is not instructions as to what Community X or Community Y should do or could do. This is an undertaking that looks at the realities of the world's economy, the nation's economy, the region's economy, and is drawing conclusions that could influence and inform decisions at the local level. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. I've been talking about strategies. Each of those goals has a number of individual strategies. So quality of place, talent magnet, business attraction, industry clusters. There are strategies, specific actions identified that relate to each of those goals. We've used this because this is the very first page of the strategy, we've used this as a sample, but I think it applies here. It's maintain and enhance quality of place as a key component of economic health. We've talked about that a number of times today. It includes things as preserve and protect natural lands in the county, especially in those areas not in targeted opportunity corridors. It talks about raising the awareness of the economic benefits of the natural lands, including agriculture, production, hunting, fishing, wildlife, etc. By the way, we have met, Molly Morrison has been a terrific supporter. We met with a number of conservancies. I will tell you that when we talked about Vista 2025, and we said to them, we think this kind of preservation activity is really an asset from an economic development point of view, which was kind of new to us as economic developers. The response, well, where have you been? We've been saying that for years. We've been saying that quality of place is important, and what we do is as important as all these other things. And so I think where we are with this is we reflected in Vista 2025, again, not the way you would see it in a typical economic development strategy. We've reflected that value that's so important, as you saw from the community questionnaire, so important to the people here in Chester County. Again, you'll see this kind of a matrix which actually has a strategy and a timeline and some of the people who could be involved in implementing the strategy. Again, not a mandate. We're not saying you must be involved, but hey, Maybe you've got a role in this. Maybe you want to participate. We'd love to have you as part of the team. So that's kind of the big picture. A lot of what we just talked about, especially when we get to those strategies, could apply in the Route 1 corridor, depending on which way you want your economy to go at the municipal level or at the corridor level. I just want to touch a little bit on the Route 1 corridor of opportunity and what the heck is a corridor of opportunity. When we started looking at this, I mentioned that this is a derivative of a recommendation in Vista, in Landscapes 2. So we looked at a lot of the elements of Landscapes 2. And there were a number of maps in Landscapes 2 that talked about corridors. So just take a look at this one as an example. This is the multimodal transportation corridor. What are the ways that people move in Chester County most efficiently, more or less? So you've got the Route 1 corridor, the Route 30 corridor, to the certain extent the 202, 322 corridor going north, and then the 724 corridor in the northern part of the county. Partly because, guess what? Years ago, somebody made a decision to build a 4-lane road. Somebody made a decision to put the East Penn Railroad along the southern part of Chester County. Those were factors in why people chose to live here, why communities grew up here, etc. The same would apply to 30, the same would apply to 724. Just to give you another example out of Landscapes 2, the major freight corridors. How do companies move their products in Chester County? So they may be in some other areas, but generally they're going to move to one of these transportation corridors. Route 1, the Route 30 corridor, to a certain extent a little bit of 202 in the eastern port, and the 724 corridor. There's a lot of other discussion in Landscapes 2 about where growth could or should occur, and it all ends up in the livable landscapes map. And if you look at those other two maps, it's really no surprise that the growth areas, and I know it's kind of hard to see, it's even hard for me to see here, if you look at the areas in yellow, red, and I'll call it mustard, if you look at those areas which are identified in landscapes, on the livable landscapes map, as growth areas, they tend, surprise, surprise, to follow the freight corridors and the transportation corridors. So in southern Chester County, it's along the corridor where you go from Kennett to Avondale to West Grove to Oxford along the Route 1 corridor. Similar kind of thing along the 30 corridor with Downingtown and Coatesville, Parksburg and Atglen, and even to a certain extent in the northern part of the county with Phoenixville and Spring City. We looked at that, and guess what? The Route 1 initiative looked at that. And if you look at that corridor, and we look at the map that the Route 1 initiative is using, which is basically mostly the area between the East Penn Railroad and Route 1 with some ancillary properties along the fringe of that, that's really been the focus of the Route 1 initiative. And you heard Jim talk about all of the committees that are looking at all the various aspects of the Route 1 corridor, from the economy to housing to open space, etc. And that's what this is really all about. How do we strike that balance that we've been talking about from the very beginning? So what does this mean for Route 1? For all of the communities along Route 1? It means, going back to strategy from the beginning, remember strategy is about choices? It means that the communities along the Route 1 corridor have the opportunity to make choices. They have a rail line, they have a road, they have some multimodal kinds of transportation, they can attract business and industry, so they have a choice. What do they want to be? They've been something historically. As we look out into the next 10 years, how do they want to see their communities evolve? And so if you look at the Route 1 corridor, you've got an amazing mushroom industry, you've got warehousing, you've got industry, you've got agriculture, you've got a great technical school, you've got lots of good open space, you've got a lot of things that are all part and parcel of that Route 1 corridor. And you have a lot of communities with different ideas about what the future should look like. Some communities are going to be more interested in development. Some communities are going to be more interested in open space and preservation, and that's great. That's the way it should be. That's how Chester County, by the way, became the place that it is, by people making decisions about what we want to be and how we want our community to look. I got a statistic, I think I got it from Molly, that somewhere between 20 and 25% of the land in Chester County is already under some kind of preservation easement. That's an amazing number for a community as large as Chester County. Again, testament to what the county commissioners did many years ago when they set up that plan to allow for those kinds of easements and to help pay for them. We've got tons of land under agricultural easement as well. And so as a result, Chester County has options as well. How can we capitalize on that quality of place that we've established? How can we build our economy? How do we make all this stuff continue to go on in the future so we can stay at the top of the heap? And just like Chester County as a whole, the Route 1 corridor has those same kinds of options and choices. What's the proper balance in each of the communities? What's the proper balance across the corridor? Again, remember, this is not a top-down mandate. This is about lots of people engaging in dialogue and conversation and trying to figure out what's right for them in this corridor. And with that, I will open it up to questions. And I will tell you right now, in case I don't have the answer, I'm hoping somebody else in the room does. But we'll do the best we can. Questions?
You answered all the questions.
I mean, that can't possibly be the case. Commissioner?
Could you talk a little bit about the next steps
Absolutely.
and implementation and how that will come about?
There are,
Could you repeat the question?
I'm sorry, can I talk about the next step? Thank you, Bob. Can I talk about the next steps in implementation? There are approximately 180 some strategies and sub-strategies. Some are very significant in terms of effort in dollars, some are less, some are easier, some are more problematic. And so what we are doing is working collectively with the county. Mark Rupsis, the Chief Operating Officer of the county, has pulled together a group that includes us and the chamber, the main chamber, if you will, the larger chamber. And we're going to involve a lot of other chambers as well as we go forward. The Tourist and Visitor, Tourist Bureau, Conference and Convention Bureau, and the other county agencies, DCD and DCED. They'll probably be the main players since they have the programs and opportunities. So we're all looking at what we're doing now, what the strategy says we ought to be doing, and trying to figure out how we need to adjust what we're doing. Some things we're probably doing terrifically, otherwise the county wouldn't be where it's at that top of the heap. Other things, if we want to keep remaining competitive, we need to adjust and maybe make some changes. So initially what we've been doing is going out and talking to people, encouraging them to look at Vista 2025, and trying to make sure the message is out there. And we're going to start working on all those things, all the strategies. There are some that are ongoing, some that are in the first year, some that are in extended periods. So we're going to keep working at it. We're going to start with the early ones and work our way through them. I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, Commissioner. Other questions? Sir?
Can you confirm that Vista 2025 is not intended to modify landscapes 2?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, it's an implementation of one of the recommendations in Landscapes 2. We tried really hard to make sure that there were no inconsistencies. I can't tell you that we were completely 100% successful, but we definitely looked at Landscapes 2 and really tried to make sure that, for the most part, we reflected that. Remembering that this is an economic development strategy and not a comprehensive plan, which covers a lot of things that don't relate to, that Vista doesn't cover what they cover and we don't cover they do. But the intent was to be an implementation arm of one of the recommendations of Landscapes. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about the strategies for infrastructure
Sure.
in terms of mainly roads and sewer?
The question was, can I talk a little bit about strategies for infrastructure? I think, again, if you think of those corridors of opportunity, if you think about Route 1 and the 30 corridor and the 724 corridor, I think you're going to see that the implementation strategy will have some similarities and some differences. If you think about the Route 30 corridor, it has the Keystone Corridor rail line. PennDOT has put a ton of money into that rail line, but the stations are now being targeted for redevelopment and revitalization, and the hopes that we can get transit-oriented development, more development to take place around those train stations in the Downingtowns and the Parksburgs and the Coatesvilles of the world. Again, taking some of that pressure off areas outside that targeted growth corridor. In southern Chester County, if you think about, we talked about those roads, you've got Route 1. There are probably going to be some things where Route 1 needs to be upgraded. There's the East Penn Railroad that's serving companies like Tasty Cake and other companies in this corridor. So you've got that. And there are properties that are actively currently zoned commercial industrial that can't be developed because there isn't water and sewer. So it's a combination of all those things. And again, I mean, I was asked the question earlier about Vista 2025 doesn't seem to be as comprehensive with respect to the regulations for development as landscapes was. And my answer to that was absolutely. Because all we're talking about is where development maybe should happen and where we should encourage it to happen. But any development that takes place is going to have to go through local zoning, local land development, going to have to get all the same permits from DEP and everybody else. So we're not saying do away with any of that. We're basically saying start to think about where you want development. We've got some suggestions in Vista 2025. And all of those communities up and down this corridor, the 30 corridor and the 724 corridor primarily, are going to have those same kinds of choices and decisions to make. Did I answer your question? Okay. I'm sorry. Try again.
That's okay. I know it's kind of far in the future and there are a lot of hurdles that have to be overcome.
Okay. Other questions? Sir?
Chester County Planning Commission has reached out with a letter to the Economic Development Council to request that maybe you get together and coordinate differences between your plan and landscapes too. Are you willing to work with them?
Absolutely. I can tell you that the Department of Community Development and the Executive Director of the Planning Commission and the staff were part of this process. In fact, we had a meeting where those two directors and the county chief operating officer sat in the room with us and TIP Strategies and talked about some of the things that were important. If there are discrepancies, I will tell you that I think we're certainly open to dialogue on where those discrepancies are. I should say, if I didn't say it already, that we do not consider, I think the commissioner said that as well, that this is not a one and done. We talked about how the world keeps changing. We anticipate that. And because we think this was the right strategy here in 2015, by 2016 or 2017, it might not be the right strategy, and we may need to adjust. So, I'm sorry, sir.
Apparently you did not go through the planning commission of the county, and some of us are a little concerned that since you don't jive very well with landscapes, maybe that should be worked out so you do jive with landscapes. We're very confident of that.
And I agree with that 100%. I will tell you that I may not share your opinion that we don't jive with landscapes. I think,
Well, there's some areas of difference.
and again, that may be. I know we really tried hard to make sure that we were as consistent with landscapes as we could be. And there are some things, again, that landscapes covers that Vista was not intended to cover. And again, landscapes is really a document that's designed to guide a number of aspects of how the municipalities handle land use and development. And I think at the end of the day, whatever development we're talking about is going to have to comply with those same kinds of thoughts and approaches and legalities. Other questions? All right. I'll go front row here.
Is there a plan for establishing open lines of communication so that residents, people can visit the website and see your progress?
Well, right now, the answer to that is yes. I'm sorry, thank you. I should be doing that. I was reminded about that. Is there an intention to have a process where the general public can follow progress on Vista 2025? The answer is yes. It's not there yet because, truthfully, we haven't made a lot of progress yet. This is a brand new strategy. We're at the very beginning. But as things happen, again, if you look at the strategy, there is a section in there about performance metrics. We expect this to be something that we're going to be tracking to see whether we're achieving the results that we intended to achieve. Some data may exist. We may actually have to create some data to see if we're succeeding at what we set out to do. So the answer is yes, we do intend to keep the community involved.
Could you explain a little bit more about Executive Alliance and how the council and the county will continue to be involved, and for staff, the chambers as well?
Sure. We anticipate. I'm sorry. Can I explain? I'm thinking about the answer. I'm not thinking about repeating the question. Could I explain how the Executive Alliance and the various other parties are going to play a role in this going forward? We anticipate that the Executive Alliance, and you got a chance to see who the members of that were, will continue to be kind of a high-level guidance, if you will. We'll probably create some subsets of the Executive Alliance focused on the individual goals to give us more specific guidance as we work towards implementation. There will be some very specific, I mentioned the agencies, the chambers, the county agencies, the council, who will be taking on a lot of the responsibility for implementing the strategies, and we'll be looking to find ways to coordinate that aspect as well. Is that what you were talking about? Okay. Sir, I'm
Yes,
sorry, I know there was one over there too.
You talked about the development of certain corridors throughout Chester County and as well as southern Chester County. I will be willing to bet my bottom dollar that if you ask any of the individuals behind me to define when you ask them to define the quality of place, not one will include the Route 41 corridor as a quality of place. For many townships, that Route 41 corridor is the bane of their existence and certainly the bane of their economic plans. Do you envision the economic development of the Route 41 corridor as part of the big picture of this Vista 2025? And if not, why not?
Well, I can first of all tell you that I'm sorry. The question was, and I'll summarize, tell me if it's wrong. Do we envision the development of Route 41 as part of the economic development strategy? I have a relatively simple answer to that. It's probably not going to be one that satisfies. But again, Vista 2025 was not intended to be a way to resolve some of the more thorny and ticklish issues that apply all over parts of Chester County. Those decisions are ultimately going to be made by the communities where those issues exist. And in that context, I would suspect that the 41 corridor has emerged, just again by geography, as a connector between Lancaster corridor and Wilmington, because there was no better way to go. And so it's a state road. There are limitations on what you can do with state roads. So I think it's going to take some creative thinking about how to solve that problem. And I can tell you, I'm not a transportation planner. I don't have that kind of expertise. So I really don't have an answer, other than it's part of that whole trying to balance and make choices about what do you want to do here? How do you want to address this problem? And clearly, I do not have an answer to that. And I can't give you an answer because I think it's going to be something that has to evolve from all the parties participating in that discussion. I'm sorry, the gentleman, all right, two in a row here, front row.
I was just thinking in terms of your analogy of Coatesville, Chester, industries failed and the economy tanked. Well, this particular area is primarily agriculture. And if there's anything that's stable, that's it. And does Mr. Herr want to start importing potatoes from China if we pave over this and build on it? I mean, is this the particular area that you want to emphasize growth as opposed to Westchester and that area that already has the infrastructure and they're not growing crops? I mean,
Well,
agriculture is very stable, so why mess with a successful
question is, agriculture and Route 1 corridor is already a very strong segment of the economy. Do we really want to see more development take place? I'll repeat the answer that I've sort of given before to that. We're not mandating, we're not telling Lower Oxford or East Marlborough or Pennsbury or anybody else what the future plan for their community should be. If you look up and down the corridor, and before I came here earlier this week, I did a drive up and down the corridor. There are some gorgeous areas, there are some developed areas. The mushroom industry is all over the Kennett area. There's industrial there. If you look at the four communities, Kennett has done amazingly well. Avondale and Westgrove are progressing, and Oxford is maybe a little ahead of those two when they're thinking about that. But think about those boroughs. What makes boroughs successful is people wanting to come into those communities. And that could be residents, it could be workers, et cetera. So again, I will go back to that balance. I mean, it's not about any intention to pave over agricultural land. It's about what do communities want. If you want jobs and residences for future generations, and you don't want to pave over everything, then how do you go about doing that? How do you manage that balance? And I think that's the answer.
I understand that perfectly. I'm not against growth, but what I'm suggesting is because this is primarily agriculture, there are other areas
Well, I will, again, if you remember the maps, what makes places functional as places for development? It's transportation corridors primarily. And because you have a 4-lane road that runs across southern Chester County, and because you have a railroad, that makes development an option. Doesn't make it a mandate, it makes it an option. And so that gets down to, what do the various communities along that corridor want? Are they looking to create jobs? Are they looking to build tax ratables? Do they want to preserve farmland? And those are going to be decisions those individual communities are going to make, either as individuals or collectively as they make those. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that question. And I think people, I mean, one of the things I talked to a portion of this group a year ago, coming out of the recession. When everything is going well and taxes are fine, you don't need tax base. But when things get tight and you need more tax revenues because you don't want to charge people more in taxes, then sometimes you need to think about how to expand the tax base. And so those are the kinds of, the context, if you will, in which those kinds of decisions are going to be made. The gentleman back over there had his hand up a couple times.
You answered his question, that was part of mine.
Okay. Ma'am.
Do the plans for development align with the existing township ordinances for zoning? Are you using the existing zoning ordinances as a guide for where you show development?
Well, one thing I'll say is that Vista, I'm sorry, keep reminding me because my mind is trying to answer the question. The question was, do the plans for development line up with the local zoning? Effectively correct? I think the easiest answer to that is Vista 2025 is not calling for any specific development. It's basically saying that these are the areas where development, and you saw by the way, we're talking about some very specific physical things, but a lot of this is about the types of development, the types of companies and all that. But if you get down to the final decision, company X wants to locate someplace, they're only going to be able to locate where zoning permits them to locate. I want to bring an industrial property, I got an industrial business, I want to bring it to your township. You don't have industrial zoning, I'm not going there. So to a large extent, and I've been saying that in a lot of different ways, the final decision on what happens in your individual communities is going to be driven by the local elected officials and what they decide in their zoning ordinance they want to have happen in their community.
Exactly, and that is the law.
Absolutely. Nothing's going to change that. Nothing about Vista changes that or really attempts to influence it.
Is the development consistent then with it? Or are you saying this would be nice here, but of course you can follow your own ordinance?
Well, when you use that word development, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, because are we talking about another mushroom farm? Are we talking about an office building? Are we talking about a Hardee's or a Wendy's or something? I mean, development is a lot of different things, all of the above. And again,
You're saying that you're not designating specific zoning areas, but you're outlining a corridor, for example, where there's going to be development.
where there can be development, because the opportunity exists.
Right, and so it sounds to me like what you're saying is those areas that you're designating are going to overlap sometimes with the ordinances and sometimes not.
At the end of the day, the ordinances are going to govern. You can't put an industrial property where there isn't industrial zoning. That has to be a local decision.
So why would you propose that then?
Because there are some industrial properties in this corridor that are already undeveloped. And there are some commercial properties that have no development. So people who want to go there, if there are zoning ordinances that permit that, they can develop there. The idea, again, is, and I know it may not seem that way, but if you want to have a balance of progress and preservation, and you want to have economic health, then you need to have some place for the economy to grow. And if you don't want it to be urban sprawl and just everywhere, then you have to tell it where it can go. And all Vista 2025 is doing with these corridors of opportunities and saying, these are places where it can go. Because you have the road, because you have the rail. And then the final decision, again, is going to be made by the local communities in terms of what they want in their community.
But isn't that in fact what our zoning ordinances have done? They've laid out where we want these various uses.
Absolutely.
So that plan exists already.
In each community, there's going to be a comprehensive plan and a zoning ordinance, to my knowledge, and it's going to say where you can put what. But as a corridor-wide basis, if community X has industrial zoning, community Y has more open space, that's great. We'll put the development in the community that wants it, and we won't put it in the community that doesn't want it.
Right, so what is different from our zoning ordinances then?
I'm not sure I fully understand that question.
Zoning ordinances together, and we would all be able to see exactly where.
Yeah, and that will say in some communities the room for development, in other communities they're not looking for it. And so we're not telling communities to take development if they don't want it. We're saying, hey, you figure out what you want at the local level. We're telling you that from a countywide economic development point of view, the Route 1 corridor has choices and options about what they want to have. Can they want more development? Can they want more open space? Do they want more residential? All those decisions are going to be made at the local level. There's a question over here. Sir.
Can you confirm that the targeted corridors of opportunity are entirely within the growth areas identified in landscapes 2?
I'm sorry, can I confirm that the targeted growth areas are,
Corridors of opportunity.
I'm sorry, corridors of opportunity are totally within the growth areas defined in landscapes 2? My best answer to that is that Vista 2025 does not draw a map of those targeted corridors of opportunity. It basically says that they are effectively the growth areas identified in landscapes 2, with the exception of the Route 1 initiative, which has established boundaries effectively between the East Penn Railroad and Route 1.
Is there a single document where we can see where the targeted corridors of opportunity are?
Probably the best place to look for that is in landscapes 2.
Where?
The livable landscapes map, which shows you the targeted growth areas. It's right on the map.
That's not a corridor of opportunity. It's a growth.
It is if the county says it's a targeted growth area. It's a place where growth can happen.
The county doesn't say it is.
All right, well, I'm not sure I fully understand. If the county, if Landscapes 2 said this is a growth area,
Right?
then that's where theoretically Landscapes 2 is suggesting growth should happen.
Okay.
And all we're doing is reflecting that in Vista 2025.
I'm asking whether the targeted corridors of opportunity are within the growth areas.
And I'm saying that there is no specific set of boundaries. We're effectively looking to the Landscapes 2 growth areas as that same corridor. So I won't say that it is or it isn't, but I think the intent was that the targeted corridors of opportunity are consistent with the growth corridors identified in Landscapes 2. Way in the back.
Natural landscapes provide essential ecosystem services such as clean water supply. Is one of your metrics of economic health the investment and growth in the preservation of natural space?
Question, if I understood it correctly, is one of our metrics metrics of economic health, the value that's generated by preservation of open space in terms of its impact on the environment. Is that essentially correct?
Yes, I mean, do you anticipate an investment in that?
One of the strategies calls for continued investment in, the county has a program, it calls for continued investment in that program. It calls for looking for ways to do bikes and trails where they should be. So I think if you look at quality of place, you'll see some of the strategies are pretty consistent. It may not be the exact words that you described, but it'll be pretty consistent with your concept. Other questions? Sir.
Can you give us one or two examples that you would say are the leading strategies or implementation ideas you have that would promote and encourage agriculture to be specifically directed at enhancing agriculture?
The question is, what are we talking about in the Vista 2025 that could be looked at as supporting and promoting agriculture? Fair enough?
Yeah.
There are a number of recommendations in Vista 2025 focused on agriculture. Some of them have to do with the business of agriculture. We like to look at pastoral lands. We like to see the lovely view we get, but farmers are business people. If they can't farm in a commercially viable way, they're going to fail. And so there are aspects of Vista 2025 that talk about helping farmers be better business people. There are other aspects of Vista 2025 that talk about continuing the program of reserving agricultural land so that farmers can continue to be a part of the economy. And there's several other that are not coming to my mind directly tonight, but yes, agriculture is a very important part of Vista 2025. It's a very important part of the Chester County economy. Sir.
Yeah, looking at the plan, there are many good components of it, and I think most of those would be where they're consistent with landscapes too. in that, we also see a lack of focus on smart growth principles that are outlined in landscapes too. And when we look at a 12-mile corridor that could essentially be a corridor of sprawl in a linear way. And part of the challenge that we see is in looking at one of the strategies, a couple of them, you actually talk about establishing a multidisciplinary task force and providing enhanced technical assistance to work with local municipalities to implement Vista 2025. So where we have questions about zoning already, it looks like, and these are slated for the timeline of 0 to 12 months. Are you currently going out and working with municipalities to change their current zoning plans?
We have no intentions of going to. I will have trouble reducing that to a question, but I'll use the last one. Are we going out and encouraging communities to change their zoning? I would say for the vast majority of the situation, we're not encouraging anyone to change their zoning. What we are looking to do in some very selected areas, and it really doesn't apply much to Route 1, but I'll give you an example. Suburban office parks, which are the heart of Chester County's economy, in the center part of the county. If you look around the country, those suburban office parks are struggling. For instance, there's millions of square feet of empty suburban office park in North Jersey. And as a result, what we're looking to do is help communities understand what might happen if you go along the same path that you've been following. But we're not advocating that some community X should change its zoning to some other kind of zoning.
Which certainly is supported, and when you talk about millennials and their new style of work.
Lifestyle centers, whatever you want to call them, right?
Absolutely.
Okay?
You know, in looking at your strategies, that is something that it seems like a very siloed group of implementation parties rather than reaching out to the community as a whole. And also in that, I don't see anything in Vista that quantifies the current vacant land and or vacant structures that could be used as redevelopment and infill rather than looking at raw land potential.
I guess the question is, there are some things that perhaps you think ought to have been in Vista 2025, including some kind of inventory of vacant and developable land.
I would think any economic development strategy that advocates for growth would take a look at what's currently there that could be used.
I will suggest that, again, this is a strategy. It was not intended to have all the answers to all the questions. I know the Chester County Planning Commission has tremendous data on what is currently vacant, what currently has the appropriate zoning for development, et cetera. I think it seemed to us it wasn't necessary to duplicate that. Again, remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to put the picture of where Chester County fits in the international, national, and regional economy. And if we want to stay competitive, we need to be thinking about these things. But as you come down to where does the development take place, I'll say it again, the ultimate decisions are going to rest with the individual municipalities and their local zoning.
We're actually going to have to end it because we're abusing the Herr's hospitality. They need to close up and clean up and do that. So
Let's take one more question.
one more question then.
Ma'am.
Yes, I have a question, first, just about answering, why is preservation not progress? But also, you talked about your guys' principles, one of them being inclusive, that you want people to be involved. Could you tell me about those roundtable sessions that you had that I was not aware of? I don't know if any of you are in public work. And then finally, why was tonight's meeting not advertised or made, put out for the public to be aware of it?
All right, so I think there's 3 questions there. I'm trying to remember them in order.
Why is preservation not progress?
All right, why is preservation not progress?
And the inclusiveness of your process, I didn't know about it until the plan was.
Relative to tonight, why it wasn't okay, why people weren't overall aware of it?
And then tonight's meeting, the first time I knew about it being public and it wasn't advertised, I found out about it by accident.
Okay, so let me take the first one first. Why isn't progress preservation? I'm not sure I've asked that. Why isn't preservation progress? I'm sorry. I think the answer to that is that I think, and while it may not seem that way to you, the fact that quality of place and so many of those strategies that relate to preservation are in an economic development strategy sort of self-defines them as part of economic development and economic health. So I'm not sure that that fully answers your question, but again, if you look at a lot of economic development strategies, they're not going to talk about preservation, they're not going to talk about the kind of things that you see in Vista. So I think we believe, and obviously there are people who may not share that belief, that Vista 2025 has tried to strike a proper balance, because that's what Chester County clearly indicated that they want, between progress and preservation. With respect to your second question about inclusiveness, and particularly tonight's meeting, this was a meeting that we knew the Route 1 initiative was active down here. The Southern Chester County Chamber of Commerce thought this was a good idea to help let people know what was going on down here. And so we took the opportunity to come out and talk to people. We'll probably be doing more of this going forward. One more? Yes, no?
Okay, one more.
Sir, last one.
Yes, thank you. I thought your choice of terms proper balance was an interesting one.
Okay.
In terms of its definition. Secondly, there's been multiple mentions made of maintaining competitiveness. What are we competing for?
Okay, that's an easy question. If you're a business, I'm sorry. Balance. Yeah, that was the second part. What was the first part of that question? It was just a statement. Proper balance, that's what it was. What's the proper balance? First of all, it's certainly not on me to decide what the proper balance is between progress and preservation in Chester County or any of the municipalities in Chester County, and we've kind of said that from the beginning. In terms of the second part of your question, and remind me again? Competitiveness. What are we competing for? All right? And I will tell you that from my perspective, it varies community to community. If you look at Coatesville, they're competing for businesses and tax base and residents. And if you look at other parts of Chester County, the competition could be for the right kinds of businesses, the right kind of development. It could be for the right kind of residential communities. Again, the competition is people have a choice. Businesses and people have a choice of where they're going to locate. And if you want them to locate in your community, you have to sort of open the doors for them. And if you don't want them to locate in your community, you more or less close the doors. And so the competition really relates to, again, the core of the message here is what do the local communities want and how do they want to address that? If you want to see development, you can create incentives and have more zoning for it. If you don't want to see development, you take the incentives away and you have less zoning for it. So I think that competition really relates to every community in terms of what they want to see happen in their community. I want to thank you all for all of your questions. It was very helpful to us.